Hey, welcome back, Paulding County Virtual Academy students. We're here for our next series of notes on U.S. history. Today, we're going to be covering what is referred to as the Mexican-American War. Hopefully, the information today will help you on your next quiz, on your vocab quiz, and on your Module 3 exam. So let's go ahead and let's just jump right into it. And like usual, what we want to start with is we want to start with the background or the context of this Mexican-American War. What kind of led up to it, and then what were the results of it? So we have to go all the way up to 1844. And so in 1844, we've got a new person as President of the United States, the Democrat James K. Polk. Now, you can't see it in his picture there, but this dude had a mullet, which is pretty awesome. Well, anyways, he becomes known he's the Manifest Destiny president. Now, we've talked about Manifest Destiny before. It's the desire to spread westward in the United States, and land and gold were kind of the two big things that were really kind of driving that forward. And he's going to do as much as any president to bring the United States westward. He actually probably brings in more territory into the United States than even Jefferson does with the Louisiana Purchase. And so what he's going to do is that once he becomes president, he's going to only promise a few things. One of the first things he wants to do is he wants to make Texas the 28th state to the United States in 1845. That's one of his really, really big goals. Now, Texas had previously been part of Mexico, but had broken away. There had been some famous fights. You probably heard maybe of the fight at the Alamo, which was a really famous fight in Texas history. You won't need to know that, but what we do need to know is that in 1845, he gets his way, and Texas is admitted and comes in as a slave state into the United States. But there was a little bit of a problem, though, when Texas gets to be part of the United States. And a lot of that had to do with how Texas had broken away from Mexico a few years before. Because when they did so, Texas and Mexico had disagreed over their borders and where that border of Texas was. Now, Mexico claimed that Texas was only that area, that gray area you see on the map right there that says the Republic of Texas, and Mexico still claimed the rest of that kind of Burgundy area up there. And the Texas and the United States claimed all of what is present-day Texas. And so that had gone all the way back to the late 1820s. And 9 years later, these land claims are still not settled. And the dispute over that land is going to lead to the Mexican-American War, which lasts from 1846 to 1848. Now, we kind of actually get this whole thing started. Because in 1846, President Polk is going to send a guy named General Zachary Taylor across the Rio Grande River, and it's going to provoke a war with Mexico. And so we kind of get this whole thing started because we want to make sure that we have this territory is ours. Now, the war itself, we win it really, really quickly. Zachary Taylor wins in northern Mexico. General Winfield Scott captures Mexico City. Stephen Kearny is going to capture New Mexico. I mean, this war goes really well for the United States. Like, we had picked the perfect time to attack Mexico. And the war finally comes to an end when we force the Mexican government to sign what is called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Now, this treaty is going to give us a bunch of different stuff. It's going to give us a ton of land. First, it's going to give us all of Texas all the way to the Rio Grande River. So all of that area in yellow, that's definitely ours now. So all that disputed territory, not disputed anymore, it's ours. Number two, they're going to give up a bunch of land. And that land that they're going to give up is called the Mexican Cession. And it's this area right over here in the map. All right, this area had all been part of Mexico before. It's not anymore. It's ours. So we get an absolute ton of land. Now, a few years later in 1853, we're going to purchase that Gadsden Purchase area for about $10 million so we could build a railway a little bit later on. But as a result of this, the United States has now achieved Manifest Destiny. We've now moved all the way to the Pacific Ocean. We're done. But the war is totally successful, but we have tons of questions and a couple really big questions. The most important big question that is still around at the end of the war is the issue of slavery in all of these new territories and the areas that we gained from Mexico. Now, many Northerners didn't want to see slavery expand to those regions. And so a Northern congressman is going to try and pass what is called the Wilmot Proviso. His name was David Wilmot. We can see where we get the name from. Now, the idea behind the Wilmot Proviso was to try and outlaw all slavery in the Mexican cession territory. Now, the Wilmot Proviso doesn't pass, but what it does do is it does bring up the issue of slavery and expansion once again, and this is going to become the real big issue going into our next unit. We're going to see this issue and the argument between westward expansion and slavery become a really big deal in the coming next couple sets of notes. Now, the next thing that happens pretty quickly after this, the next year, is that they discover gold in San Francisco. Now, and the California gold rush is on in 1849. Now, what this is going to lead to is this leads to a flood of people moving to California. They're all called 49ers, and they're moving to the San Francisco area. Oh, is that where the football team name comes from? All right, and they're all hoping to strike it rich. And they're coming from all around the world. They're coming from Asia, Latin America, Europe, and the East Coast of the United States. And we're seeing tens of thousands of people flooding to California. Now, the result of this gold rush is that California now has the population to apply for statehood. And so they apply for statehood. But the question is, are they going to be a free state or a slave state? And that becomes, once again, that's the argument. What should happen with the expansion of slavery? Should California come in? How should they come in? And so we're going to have a compromise. And that compromise is negotiated by a guy named Henry Clay, who's pretty important at this time period. And it becomes known as the Compromise of 1850 because we're not creative with naming these things. And this really, at least temporarily, solves this dispute between North and South over slavery. And so here's what it includes, and you'll need to know these. Number one, California is going to enter as a free state. The people of Utah and New Mexico could get popular sovereignty, meaning they could vote on whether or not they wanted slavery or not. And then the slave trade is going to end in Washington, D.C. And so, although slavery was still allowed there, no longer could you sell slaves. And here's the crazy thing. They used to actually sell slaves on the steps of the Capitol building was where one the slave trading posts were. And so now that was gone, and abolitionists were pretty happy about that. But in return for the slave trade being gone in Washington, D.C., what the South is going to get out of this is they're going to get a stronger fugitive slave law that helps to make it easier for Southerners to recapture slaves that had escaped to the North. Well, that's going to go ahead and end it for all our information for today. Just a couple reminders for you guys. We need to know the reasons behind the start of that Mexican-American War. It was over those border disputes with Texas when we brought Texas in or annexed Texas in 1845. Definitely want to know Polk's behind the whole thing. We win the war quickly. That Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo, we get that Mexican cession, all that land. But the big question's over slavery. Wilmot Proviso says no slavery. Doesn't pass. Then California, thanks to the gold rush, wants to come in. And we have to have that compromise of 1850 to kind of solve all the issues about whether or not California should come in as a free state or a slave state. Well, that's all that we've got time for today. Until next time, have a great day. Bye for now.